Minor league news and brews here, and coming here with Jarrod Prugar from the Altoona Mirror. And I don't know if it's mirror or mirror. It's always a word that I've had trouble with. I don't know. So Jarrod could maybe help us out with that. But what he's going to help us out with tonight is what's going on down in Altoona. And there's something that's been bothering me this entire time. I mean, there's a lot of news going on, and you wrote about it a couple weeks ago. Liover Peguero. Liover Peguero. That's not what you were thinking, was it, Jarrod?
No, I thought for sure. Yeah, you threw me a curveball there, but I like it. I like curveballs.
So Liover Peguero, when he started out last year, he had about 236, and then he came back. I actually started out 296, came back from Pittsburgh, hit 236. Beginning of this year, he's hitting about 230 something. He gets back on his horse. He's hitting 290 something. What's going on with Liover Peguero right now, man?
Yeah, I mean that's a good question, and people, I think that was one of the things that people were worried about the most, right? Peguero and Nick Gonzalez were supposed to be a package deal up the middle, and then Gonzalez passes him up, and now he's in AAA, and Peguero starts back in AA, and of course there's a little bit of a disappointment, but watching him go to Pittsburgh, play well enough to get to Pittsburgh, come back from Pittsburgh, and he just didn't seem right the rest of the year, and I don't know what it was. I don't know if he was just pressing too much or just trying to get back there too hard. And it just didn't seem right. It didn't seem like everything was clicking on all cylinders. And now this year, he started out a little slow, but I think the biggest thing, and this is why I kind of wrote about it, is talking with Calix Crab there, the curve manager, is the he's seeing the ball better. He's seeing the ball and he's driving the ball. You can look at a lot of different things that tell you a guy is breaking out or about to break out. And I think you look at the walk rate and you look at where he's going with pitches and you look at how hard the ball is coming off the bat. And Peguero checked a lot of those boxes. And now, I mean, the series against Bowie, he's roping the baseball. And I think that's good for the curve, but especially, for Peguero, who's a guy that could and should be in AAA by the time the season's done.
Yeah, and that's where the thing that comes for me is that, he's a guy that is been on the 40 man for, a decent amount of time here. And so, when you look for a guy that's going to be called up, and I was kind of, snowballing it a little bit there, but it's he's 230 when he's not hitting, 290 when he is hitting. But the biggest thing for me is, everybody says the bat will play. Does the defense play? Because that's what everybody will see with, Uno Cruz. Can he make the plays? Could, Liover Peguero be a guy that could be a steady man at shortstop for the Pirates moving forward?
I think it's possible. For him, I think really where he's going to see the field is at second base. And that's where he's been getting a lot of reps for the curve lately. He's been playing second base quite a bit. The defense has got to improve. I think the bat will play. When he hits it, he does hit it hard. And I think he's got that approach. But if the defense, the glove work can get a little bit better, I think he'll be just fine. It's just one of those deals where he's just got to pull it all together. And I don't think he's quite done that yet this year. And it's hard when you're playing a different position and you see things a little bit differently when you're on different sides of the infield. So I think that goes into it. But at the same time, the Curve and the Pirates are going to put him into positions to succeed. And I think right now that is at second base. Let's be real. When O'Neill Cruz comes back, shortstop is his. Don't get me wrong. Liover Peguero is good, but he's not O'Neill Cruz good. So it'd be interesting to kind of see, how things play out. But at the same time, the easiest way to get on the field is a position that is playing a position of weakness. And for the Curve, especially, at the Pittsburgh level too, it was second base, and getting him at second base is going to be huge for him, down the road.
Yeah, and that's where like the Pirates lay right now is I mean, once Uno Cruz comes back, like shortstop is his position. But I'm gonna move to the pitchers here at some point in time, and it's kind of tough because like Kyle Nicholas, he was in he was in Altoona last year, and he did not. I mean, he pitched pretty well. He showed up in spring training, and then he comes back to Altoona, and people look at the numbers, and the numbers are not great for Kyle Nicholas. I mean, when you look at it, you look for a guy that could move forward. I mean, everybody's looking at, Quinn Priester, they're looking at Luis Ortiz, they're looking at Johan Oviedo. Kyle Nicholas, I've seen some adjustments from him. Tonight was actually a pretty good night for him. Unfortunately, the curve got, no hit. But for Kyle Nicholas, do you see him taking that step forward? I mean, that's a guy that I actually like a lot.
Yeah, I think he's approached the game a little bit differently this year, and I think he's approached it in a way that shows growth. I mean, it's hard to evaluate based on statistics, especially early in the year, because there just aren't enough ways to judge it. Because I mean, you have one bad outing, and that just skyrockets literally everything. But I think the biggest thing for him is getting out of innings clean, and he's getting a lot of bad luck. I mean, there are games, in April he gave up 7 runs, none of them were earned. So, you look at stuff like that, and there has been a little bit of bad luck at the same time. I mean, he did all right Friday night. 3 earned. Typically, that'll keep teams in the game. But I mean, the thing with him is he's got to be able to finish, and he was the guy that would get the 2 starts every series. So he would start Tuesday and go Sunday. Now he's back to once a week, and I think that's going to help him too, because that second start is always a start that isn't always good. You're not always going to go deep. You're typically about 75, maybe even 65 pitches, depending on how things go. But if he's able to do that, then see what he can do 1 start a week, get him back to where he should be, and I think he'll be all right.
And then we got to look at another starter that came up from Greensboro, Sean Sullivan. Sean Sullivan down in Greensboro. I take the ERA out of Greensboro. I toss it to the side. I do every single time. In Greensboro, his whip was 1.360. He had 84 strikeouts in 75 innings. This year, up in Altoona, to this point, is 1.157 on his whip. Has a little bit less on his, strikeouts per inning, but Sean Sullivan is showing that he's putting it from different angles. Like
Hmm.
he's up top, he's on the side. I think this guy, like he might be a surprise for a lot of Pirates fans.
Yeah, and I think he's been a welcome surprise. Biggest thing is it's for him especially. Opponents are only hitting 208 off of him, right? So people aren't really getting on base. The biggest thing for him, you kind of look at the strikeouts, 24 strikeouts, only 11 walks. The big thing for him is being able to go deeper into games. And I know you're loading up, like you're building up, typically throughout. So I mean, now he's up to 6 innings more often than not. He's only got 1 win, which is absurd because opponents are only hitting like 208 off of him on the year. I mean, they're hitting. He's throwing well. It's just he's not. Either the game is tied, or his last 2 outings he's given up two earned, and either the game has been tied, or luckily the other night he won. But you're right about the ERA in Greensboro. There are a lot of things in Greensboro that you can kind of toss out, just the way that the ballpark plays. But the biggest thing is his walks are down. His strikes are up a little bit from last year as far as the strike percentage. But he's been a welcome sight for Curve fans, and I think he makes things difficult for hitters. By that by that awkward arm slot because you think he might be coming from the side, and then he comes about three quarters, and it's just kind of it's repeatable and it's repeated, but it's just kind of different than what they're typically used to seeing.
Yeah, and I would think right now, I mean, people are, I mean, they get anxious. They're wondering what's going on in Greensboro, what's going on in Altoona. If you could think about a guy that could be the next person to come up, from Greensboro, or who could be the next person to come from Altoona to Greensboro, out from Altoona to Indianapolis. I would think of, what is one guy that you would think would be going from Greensboro to Altoona, and who is one guy that you could think would be the first to go from Altoona to Indianapolis?
Well, I think for Altoona, Indianapolis, I would probably go with Sullivan. I think just the body of work has been there. The results haven't always been great, but again, just like Kyle Nicholas, a lot of that I can attribute to some bad luck. Um, but at the same time, you kind of just got to roll with it, and that's what's unique about that. Everybody wants to say Henry Davis, Henry Davis, Henry Davis, and they're probably not wrong, but Henry Davis is a player that needs to play every day. And at Indianapolis, that's not going to happen, even with Andy Rodriguez and him splitting time at catcher. So I mean, that's the shame of it, or however you want to put it. And we'll talk a little bit more, I'm sure, about Henry Davis. It's the elephant um, in the room everywhere I go now, which is fun. It's fun to talk about. He's fun to watch, so that's always a plus. But I would pick Sullivan as far as that. Now, as far as Greensboro, I think that's a little difficult because it's a launch pad down there. So pitcher stats are going to be inflated, hitter stats are going to be inflated as well. So that's always something that you kind of have to be cognizant of, um, just based on what's going on there. Um, but selfishly, I want to see guys like Jace Bowen and Hunter Head and guys like that. Um, but I also want to see Chang too. I mean, he's got a power tool that I don't think people are used to, which is good. Uh, but at the same time, they're all kind of around the same area. You got Trey Gonzalez that I think has come on strong as well, and then you've got some Jackson Glenn action in there too. So I mean, I'm selfishly wanting to see Jace Bowen and guys like that. So that would be my pick. But I also like the way that Trey Gonzalez has played. He's hitting 327, only appeared in 13 games, but 16 hits. So he's averaging over a hit per game, which is pretty solid.
Yeah, and you see guys like in Greensboro, it's I mean, it's tough to analyze what's going on with those guys, because I mean, is it the launch pad that's going on there? Is it actually real? But here's the thing: is I've talked to guys down there, and there's been a lot of things where it's like there's a lot of launch pads like that are outside of Greensboro. So I mean, but you also have to take into account like a pitcher, like they're looking at different stuff. They're trying different stuff. There's different stuff going on. For me, the Altoona outfield is extremely interesting. You have Matt Gorski. You have Lolo Sanchez. You have Matt Frazier. Matt Frazier, who a couple years ago was, the minor league player of the year in the Pirate system. I think you have to see one of those guys emerge at some point in time. If you had to pick one of those guys, and I love all those guys, they all play very hard. They all prepare very hard. They all, have at some point in time showed up. If you had to pick a guy that would have to go up to Indy out of those three guys, I mean, I'm going Gorski just because of recency bias. But I
No,
can see
I
Matt Frazier as well.
I like Gorsey because I think Gorsey gets there last year if he doesn't hurt his hamstring or his quad or his leg or whatever he hurt on his leg. I mean, the hit tool plays. I wish I could have saw him more for Altoona last year, but he gets hurt. You know, and that kind of sucks. But I have not been overly impressed with Matt Frazier since that year in Greensboro. He came up to Altoona and raked, but last year it just didn't click for him. I don't know if he's trying to press too hard to get back to that level, but at the same time, you know, outfield is a position of strength. I feel in the Pirates organization at this point because you still have Jack Sawinski in the major league level. You have guys like Henry Davis playing the outfield too. Just kidding. But at the same time, you got to something's got to give, and you got to get better. And that's what sucks about Matt Frazier is that it just hasn't started to snowball in the right direction yet.
Yeah, Matt Frazier, I mean, he's a guy that I had higher expectations for him at certain points in time. I mean, he had the hamate bone injury, and we all realize that's a tough injury to come back from. He hit well. We've got Jack Triolo who's coming back from that as well. But I feel like that Pirates fans don't realize that certain players kind of stall out in AA. Like they don't realize like what happens to players, and they play very well out there. And then at some point in time, like it just doesn't play at upper levels. Matt Gorski, I hope and think that he may play at a higher level, but I mean, guys get AAA. You have Malcolm Nunez this year. He's coming on now, but you don't know what guys are going to do at that point in time. But you mentioned a guy that may play right field, may play catcher, may play DH, and I'm thinking that what most people are sticking around on this podcast to hear about is Henry Davis. I mean, Henry Davis has hit very well in a little over 100 plate appearances during this season. Obviously, when he hits well, he plays well on social media. I wanted to ask people why they didn't want to share when Henry Davis had a 144 night. But, if they don't want to share that, they don't want to share that. Henry Davis is ready to hit in Major League Baseball. I don't want to play against that. I don't want to, I'm just kind of playing with some people who, if he hits 2 home runs, they share it. If he hits 1 for 4 with, a single, they don't share it. Henry Davis is a very good hitter. But, I mean, Jarrod, right field, DH, center, catcher, what is the immediate future for Henry Davis?
The immediate future is catcher. He's going to get at least 2 games a series. They're typically going to be back-to-back and in right field. It gives his legs a break. It gives a chance to Dylan Shockley to catch. And Dylan Shockley is a magnificent defensive catcher. I mean, he threw 4 guys out in the Curves' last homestand in a single game against the Akron Rubber Ducks. So they have 2 capable catchers. But it's also to get him some reps out there, which is by design. There are some injuries with Endy being hurt and Shockley being up in in AAA, and Carter Binns being hurt. Henry had to play quite a bit behind the plate. So this is by design. And I think, there's a possibility of him playing both positions. I think him and Endy are both athletic enough catchers where they can play multiple positions. I think Endy's a little bit more versatile. But at the same time, Henry Davis is more than adequate out in right field, and the way that PNC Park plays, I don't think he's going to overly hurt them out there. Do I think he's ready for that yet? Hitting wise, yes, I think he's more than capable and able to hit major league pitching consistently. Maybe not at the 308 clip that he's hitting Double A pitching, but it's the defense that needs work. It's the receiving. It's Altoona lost on a walk off wild pitch, which isn't his fault. The ball was spiked in the other batter's box, but a little bit of improvement, and I think he's going to be even better back there. And I think that's the thing that people fail to realize. It's not just hitting that goes into playing a catcher. I mean, the Pirates have had some historically bad hitting catchers lately, and you can talk about Austin Hedges and Jason DeLay all you want as far as that is concerned, but it's so much more as a catcher. You have to call the game. And that matters because the Pirates as a whole allow their catchers to call the game and set up that game plan and what mode of attack pitchers like Mitch Keller are going to be in. So that's why when Mitch Keller says Hedges called a great game, that's why that stuff matters. It's the receiving. It's Henry Davis is a guy that starts on one knee. That's not always great when there are runners on base. As far as moving laterally, it's just being able to move like that he's not quite major league ready yet. Could he play and do that in AAA? Yes, probably. But it's better to learn in Altoona rather than learning in Pittsburgh and being thrown in that fire right away.
Yeah, I mean, everybody wants to see the bat up there, and everybody knows the bat could probably play. But I mean, the big thing is for me is the right field position. Like, is that a way to get him up to Pittsburgh, or is that just something that they're giving him, like, a little bit of a blow in Altoona?
I mean, I think that's tough because you look at the way the Pirates roster is constructed. Andrew McCutchen isn't supposed to DH every day. I'm 95% sure, without knowing Derek Shelton and Ben Sherrington's like plans for McCutchen, is he's supposed to be in right field every so often too. But because He-Man Choi gets hurt, it changes things up a little bit as far as what they want to do with the DH position. But if I'm the Pirates organization, if I'm calling him up, it's to play every day. And it's not to send him back down unless he is absolutely being terrible at the plate. And I don't think that's going to happen. But at the same time, you can't learn on the fly with a raw outfielder or a raw catcher because, like I said, there's so much more that goes into it. But I think right now it's to give him some blows and just prove that he's a little bit more versatile. But it also gives him a chance to see the game in a different way where he's, catching, you're in it every pitch. But in the outfield, you have to be ready every pitch, but you're not always going to get the ball. So I think it's just kind of a nice little change of pace and by design for sure.
Yeah, and for me, the biggest thing is right now is, I mean, like, we're hoping that, some of the success can continue in Pittsburgh. Some of the success can continue with, I mean, you don't want Henry to hit 250 and be struggling down Altoona. I mean, like, what he's doing is a good thing. We're hoping that Endy, can turn stuff around. I mean, he's had an injury, different stuff like that. Like, people are just like, I don't know if they're hoping or wishing for injuries or wishing for whatever, but you're wishing for all of your players, at whatever level they're at, to be hitting well. And what I'm hoping for is, for Jarrod to have good stuff to write about for the Altoona Mirror. I'm hoping that, there's good stuff going on there. Jarrod, it has been great to talk to you, and I hope we can do this, soon.
Yeah, I'm all for it, man. Anytime. And I want Henry Davis to stay in Altoona as long as possible. He's a fun player to watch. But I know that's not realistic. But no, it was fun talking. I'm more than available anytime.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And we're gonna go do some beer reviews here now. And everybody, we're gonna talk about some more minor league baseball next weekend. A pitcher of beer, a pitcher of beer.
let's order another pitcher of beer. That pitcher of beer should come over here. I love that pitcher of beer.
Sorry, everybody. I couldn't find the button over there. I was trying to press it, but we're talking about beer here. And one of my favorite breweries, and it was one of the, I don't know if it was the initial brewery that got like signed to PNC Park, but everybody saw the Firehouse Red from the brewery up in Slippery Rock, Pennsylvania. Everybody saw that, the Firehouse Red from North Country Brewing. It came into Pennsylvania, it was coming to PNC Park very early. That was one of my favorite beers. It's one of my brother-in-law's favorite beers. And that one right here, on the weighted on base average, I give it a 350. I'm not a big, that red ale. It's got a little bit of bite to it. Everybody loves it. I give it a 350 on the batting average. It's a 325 on the weighted on base average. The Buck Snort Stout was next one I tasted. That one, I think it's a Buck Rub. I'm pretty sure as a hunter that the does, they give more of the snout. They give more of the, but you know what? I'd call it the Buck Rub Snout. They call it the Buck Snout Stout. I gave it a 325, but that one's got to be marked up because I'm not much of a snout guy. And that one comes up to 375. One of my favorite beers ever come out of this brewery is the Stinky Hippie. And I'm not a Stinky Hippie. It's got this dank. They call it the dank. It's an American Pale Ale. When you say it has a dank feel to it, it has like a little bit of a bite to it. That's a 425 for me. Weighted on base average, that's about a 375. The Backpack Stash. I actually love the name of this one because like you can throw this in your cooler, in your backpack, do whatever with it. It also tastes really good. I give this about a 400. 350 weighted on base average. And I know there's another, it might be a podcast. These guys, yadjagoff.com. This is my spot, Yadjagoff. This is my spot, Yadjagoff. It's an American Pale Ale, 375. I'll put that down to about a 350. Good beer, good tasting. Maybe get a Henry Davis and Eddie Rodriguez up to Pittsburgh as soon as possible, but let's save him a spot. Yeah, Jagoff. All right, guys. Let's go Indians. Let's go Curve. Let's go Hoppers. Let's go Marauders. And we'll talk to you guys next week.